A lot of players may not realize this, but Ropecasters are some of the most powerful weapons in the Forbidden West. So in this video, I'm going to take you through my ultimate Ropecaster build that I've dubbed the Ropecaster Disaster build. This is a build that is absolutely fantastic for taking out groups of machines, which for a lot of players is the hardest and sometimes most frustrating part in the entire game. It also works amazingly well dealing with some of the game's more annoying machines like Clamorjaws and Leap Blashers, and it will absolutely shred through groups of flying machines like Glinthawks, Sunwings, and Waterwings. And if you're going into the arena, it's one of the most efficient ways to tackle some of the game's toughest challenges. Now this is a build that primarily focuses on the tie that binds Ropecaster, which is one that you can pick up from a merchant once you gain access to the Burning Shores. Now if you don't have access to the Burning Shores and can't get the tie that binds, there are still some useful Ropecasters that you can use, which might not be as effective but still pretty useful. And a lot of the concepts that I'm going to show you can be applied to other builds as well, so if you don't have access to the DLC, don't worry, this build is still for you. Now the concept for this build is pretty simple. Tie down and immobilize the machines using the Ropecaster, then trigger a massive explosion, which we're going to get to take out multiple machines all at the same time. And we're really only going to need 2 weapons in order to make this happen. Now the first weapon we'll need, of course, is the tie that binds. And there are a few reasons why the tie that binds works so well for this build. First, it's the only legendary Ropecaster in the game, which means that it comes with 5 coil slots that we are definitely going to want to take advantage of. Next, it comes with binding ropes, which we're going to want to use to tie down the machines. But again, if you don't have the tie that binds, you can pick up the Elite Ropecaster from the merchant outside your base, which also works really well. And the third and key reason why I like the tie that binds is that it's the only Ropecaster that comes with explosive canisters. Now, I recently did a video where I talked about some of the most powerful hidden gem weapons in the game, which I'll link in the description if you want to check it out, but in that video, canisters were at the top of my list. Canisters are an ammo type that you can get from canister Ropecasters like the tie that binds or the Elite Canister Ropecaster, and they are an absolute blast to play around with. They work really well as traps if you want to deal elemental damage to a machine or group of machines, or in this case trigger an explosion. And to trigger a canister, typically you need a similar ammo type, like a frost arrow to trigger a frost canister, or a plasma arrow to trigger a plasma canister, but explosive canisters work a bit differently. They don't require that you use explosive ammo in order to detonate them, which makes them an extremely flexible option for this build. Impact, fire, and explosive ammo all work really well. Now for reasons that we'll discuss, I prefer to use explosive ammo, but it is one of the most expensive ammo types resource-wise, so I probably wouldn't recommend it all the time unless you just have a ton of resources on hand. So when we're choosing a secondary weapon to trigger the canister, there are a few different options. But for this build, I typically go back and forth between the Last Argument Spike Thrower with the advanced explosive spikes and the Brawl Breaker Bolt Blaster with the explosive bolts. Now the real key to this build is making the explosion from the explosive canister as big and as powerful as possible. And to do that, there's a couple of things we want to keep in mind. You can attach multiple canisters to a machine for a bigger explosion, but damage caps depending on the size of the machine. So if you don't want to waste canisters, I wouldn't go just loading up a lightweight machine with 6 canisters just for the fun of it. If you're trying to take out a large group of machines or a group of machines with a heavyweight, I'd use a lot of canisters, but other than that, I'd probably only use 1 or 2. And when triggering the explosion, for maximum damage, you want to be sure to hit the canisters directly. This is why I like using a Bolt Blaster, since it doesn't rely so much on accuracy. And when using a spike thrower, I like using the splitting spike weapon technique because it has a pretty wide AoE and therefore a much greater chance of triggering the canister directly. Now for coils on the Ropecaster, again, it's all about maximizing that explosion. Now typically when you're using a Ropecaster, you're doing it mainly to tie down machines, so you want to use coils like draw speed and overdraw coils. But fortunately, the tie that binds already comes with the plus 65% draw speed perk and 25% reload speed, so we don't need to waste any coils on draw speed. So instead, we want to go all in on making the explosion from the explosive canister as big and as powerful as possible. And to do that, we're going to want to use all explosive damage coils. Now in my build, I'll be using 5 12% explosive damage coils, which are the strongest explosive damage coils in the game. You can pick up 2 of these coils from the merchant in the arena, and since I'm on New Game Plus, I already have 2 from my previous playthrough. These are coils that you can also get as random drops from killing machines, so if you have 5 of them, you'll want to use 5. Otherwise, just use as many as you have, and then whatever combination of the highest explosive damage coils you have in your inventory. Now perhaps the trickiest but most important part of this build is actually using the Ropecaster to tie down the machines, because we're going to want to try to group them as closely together as possible. I typically like to just run around and get the machines all riled up, and when they start chasing me, I'll just tie them down one by one. Once you get the first machine or two tied down, it becomes a lot easier to manage the chaos and get them all bunched together. And because machines are tied down for up to 90 seconds, you should have plenty of time to lure in any machines that might not want to immediately cooperate. Now, if you're having trouble using a Ropecaster, there's a couple of things you can do to make it a bit easier. You want to make sure that you're fully drawing or overdrawing your weapon before shooting, which is going to allow the rope to attach to an armor plate. This is why draw speed coils and overdraw coils are useful, so if you are having trouble, you may want to swap out an explosive coil or two for that. But by sliding while you draw your Ropecaster, you can take advantage of the quick draw mechanic, which makes it a lot faster to overdraw and tie down machines. And if all else fails, throwing down a smoke bomb is one of the easiest solutions because it instantly puts nearby machines in a confused state and gives you a nice buffer to tie down the machines. And once you have all the machines tied down, you'll want to attach the canister or canisters to one of the machines, and usually I just pick the biggest one in the group. Now the last component of this build is the Valor Surge, which is going to be the Chained Burst Valor Surge. If you're not already using the Chained Burst Valor Surge to take out groups of machines, you definitely should because it is fantastic for dealing damage and just a lot of fun to play around with. When fully upgraded, the Chain Burst Valor Surge chains damage between nearby machines up to 100%, which is what's going to enable us to take out a group of machines with just one explosion. This is also another reason why I like to use explosive ammo, because if by chance the group isn't taken out by the initial explosion, they'll get a ton of secondary damage from the explosive ammo. And with the Chain Burst Valor Surge still active, this should take out any of the remaining machines. Now for armors and weaves, one of the good things about this build is that it's not dependent on a certain armor or skill. Throughout most of this video, I've been using either the Quinn Marine or the Nora Thunder Warrior, which I think are just two of the best all-around armors in the entire game. But I do think that prioritizing concentration skills like Concentration Plus, Deep Concentration, and Concentration Regen definitely helps when tying down machines and aiming to trigger the canister, but it's certainly not a requirement. And anything that helps fill up your Valor Surge meter more quickly, like Valor Surge Master, is also useful, especially if you're in the arena where you don't start out with a full Valor bar. I would probably just stay away from skills having to do with stealth because it makes it slightly more difficult to group all the machines together when you're trying to tie them down. But other than that, it's really up to you and what armors and weaves you like using the most. And if you want to check out another build video, I put together a build where you can literally take out any machine in just one shot, which I'll be sure to link in the description below. And be sure to let me know in the comments if you found this video helpful and what other build videos you'd like to see in the future. Thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.